Okay, so for some sample problems, more practice for for day 2, we're going to start with number 5, example 5, part A only on page 15. So we've got one of these sigma notation problems, and instead of going through f of 1, f of 2, f of 3, f of 4, like I showed in the pre-lesson, that's an option, all the way up to 13, and then add them all up, we're going to use the shortcut method. So what does this really mean? Well, n is 13. A sub 1 means, what do I get when I plug in 1, my first value for I? Well, 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5. So I'm going to put that right there. This is the final solution when we plug in that number at the top there. So f of 13 equals 3 times 13, which is 39, plus 2, which is 41. So I put that 41 in there. Don't forget to divide that by 2. That's easy to forget. Crunch that number out. 13 times 46 all over 2. I'm going to go ahead and divide. 2 goes into 46 23 times. Pause. And that is, I had to get a calculator, 299. I didn't want to screw that up and waste your time. I'm going to hit pause one more time, get a couple more problems out. Okay, so here's one of these story problems, and remember, the key to these is to determine whether or not you can quickly find D, which is the common difference, or not. If you read this problem, it's asking us to find how many seats are in the auditorium. So I'm doing this problem kind of backwards. Like, we're going to have to use this sum of the entire auditorium formula. But before we do that, we've got to find the number of seats in the back row, in the 35th row, and that's where this formula comes into play. So with all that being said, the number of seats in each row of an auditorium increases as you go back from the stage. Front row has 24, second row 29, there's a difference of 5. Third row has 34, again a difference of 5, so we've noticed D is 5. So we can fill this in right now that far. Just by looking at the information, we're like, aha, we're onto something. And they're not asking for how many seats are in row 33, how many seats are in row 32. So we don't have to, we need to get to there, here. So look what it says. It says if there are 35 rows, see, that's where we need to find the number of seats in the 35th row. So we're going to start by plugging this information in. How many seats are in the first row? It says 24. We know the common difference is 5. We're concerned about the 35th row. I'm going to have to get a calculator out here, but I'm going to get 24 plus 5 times 34. Now let me calculate this using a calculator. And I just multiplied 5 times 34, got 170, and that adds up to 194. Now if they were asking how many seats are in the 35th row, we'd be done. It's not what they're asking. How many seats are in the whole auditorium? Remember, this is the one that's going to find the total solution, whether it's cans or ceiling tiles or bricks. Now they're talking about seats. So we want to know the entire sum of all 35 rows. So we're going to use n as 35. Remember, the number of seats in our front row has 24. In the back row, we just figured that out, 194, all over 2. Now, if we crunch this all out, we're going to get 35 times This plus this is 218 all over 2. And if you use your calculator and hammer that all out, let me do that a second. What we get is 3,815 seats in this auditorium. So that's pretty fancy stuff there. Ask me if you have any questions. I'm going to get the second example ready to go. Okay, last problem for your sample problems before you get into your homework. Your homework's going to definitely reflect this, but each problem's slightly different, so be on your guard. So, number 26. While we read this, remember, we're looking, wondering, does this spoon feed us the letter D, the common difference in the arithmetic sequence? And the answer is no. I already know that because I read the problem, but let's talk about why. The members of a school's color guard begin with performance in a pyramid formation. The first row has one member. Okay, so get that in your mind. Third row, see how it skips the second row? Jumps right to the third row, and they tell you there's 5 members. There's no way you can develop a pattern to determine what the common difference is from the first row to the second row to the third row. There's just no way to do it. That's your clue. When you know that, you must find D. How are we going to do that? We're going to use this formula. But the question asks, what is the explicit definition for this sequence? Well, all we know is the third row in this situation has 5 members. So, in the back of my mind, I know the third row has 5 members. So I'm going to replace that with 5. Remember, I'm trying to find D using this formula because it wasn't spoon-fed. Okay, how many members are in the first row? Well, there's one person. Bless that person's soul. They better know what they're doing. Don't know what D is. N, we're talking about the third row. That's -1. Crunch the math out. 5 equals 1 plus 3 minus 1 is 2, 2D. If I subtract 1 from both sides, I get 4 equals 2D. Divide by 2, divide by 2, and I get D is 2. Now, when all they want is the explicit definition for this sequence, they're really just saying, find D, put it where it belongs, and rewrite the generic equation. So it's this filled in with a 2. And really what we're able to do now is answer any question they give us about any particular row. Again, notice they're not asking, look at what they're asking. How many members are in the 8th row? They're not asking how many members are in the entire band. So we're not going to use that other formula with the S. We're just going to stick with this because this will get the job done. So we know we're trying to find this portion of the equation is going to get her done for us. But they want us to talk about the 8th row. So we want to know the answer for the 8th row. This portion of the formula will do it for us now that we know D. How many members are in the front row? 1. We know the common difference is 2. We figured that out. What row are we worried about? The 8th row. And so then we do crunch the numbers. 2 times 7. 14 plus 1 is 15. So there are 15 members of that color guard in the 8th row. Hopefully you guys have picked up on the repetition of this and you'll have better success on your homework.